Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. I am thrilled and delighted to be with a colleague and friend, Kara Ward. Hi Kara, how are you?
Hey Denise, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
So what's interesting about our friendship and colleagueness is that we actually only connected with a virtual conversation within the past, I would say 10 days, but we've known each other for years on
Yes,
social media, which I
yes.
think is kind of funny. So
A long time on social
yes,
media
yes, a
with the
long
tweet
time.
chats back in the day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. So it's been great to be able to connect with you
you as well.
face to face as
Absolutely.
much as
You
we
as
can
well.
connect
I
face
feel
to
like
face.
I've known you for forever.
I totally agree. It's just fascinating. Okay. So we really connected over the past 10 days or so about we have got to make a change in terms of how we support and help family caregivers. And you have been in a caregiving situation for your entire adult life.
Yes.
So you cared for your mom,
Mm-hmm.
and then she died, and then you took over the care of your grandmother.
Correct.
And now your grandmother is entering her end of life.
Yes.
And you posted a video last week that
Mm-hmm.
talked about basically what a nightmare it is to get the right help for your grandmother
Mm-hmm.
and the right support for you. So tell us a
Absolutely.
little bit about what happened last week.
So what happened last week? So to give you a little backstory, my grandmother's in her 90s. She has cancer, which she's choosing not to treat because of her age. And I fully support that. And I fully get that. Just because you choose not to treat it does not mean we should neglect your pain or the management of your end of life. And I feel like there's a real disconnect in the medical community and the caregiving community with that. Um, and so that's another big topic we need to address. So she went into the hospital on a Friday morning via rescue squad because she was having significant pain because the cancer is in her bones, and that's very, very painful. By the time I had gotten there, they had only treated her with Tylenol and were sending her home. So, as every caregiver does, they hand you your loved one and no instructions, no follow up, no plan of action for care. Just it feels like, okay, take her home now. We can't fix her, so you take her home. And that was pretty much devastating to me. So I was kind of in panic mode, like we all are, because as we have talked in the past about, these things only happen on Fridays or weekends for sure, when it's hard enough to get help. And then in the pandemic, there's no help. I was reaching out to care agencies and her doctor and anything I could think of to just try and get help in the house to get me through the weekend. And I wasn't able to find anybody at all. So it was left to me to kind of fill that void. But I'm relatively young. I'm 45. I have two children. I have a full time job. So it just went into juggle mode. But it was devastating, and I felt really deflated. And I spent a week sleeping in a chair next to her bed, trying to manage her pain on my own through a doctor who decided a home visit wasn't warranted. Um, and so I kind of just went into doctor mode. And one of the things I mentioned in my video, um, all of this, she was on hospice in her 90s with terminal cancer, and they released her from hospice 5 months into care. So I just felt like it was a total systematic failure for her care and a total systematic failure to me as well, because I had absolutely nowhere to turn except to my virtual caregiving community, yourself included, who kind of help you peel back the layers of what are my options now.
So you actually were able to get a new hospice organization.
Correct.
So you didn't go back to the old one who
No.
basically said your grandmother no longer qualifies for hospice in her
Mhm.
90s with terminal cancer.
Can you
And I
imagine?
know
What
I
else
do.
qualifies you? I don't know.
Yeah. So then you got a different hospice organization
Mhm.
and they've already enrolled your
We're
grandmother.
working on that as well. So in a week's time, I pulled together private agency care I've pulled together a doctor with some virtual visits to help prescribe in-home pain medication, including narcotics, lidocaine patches, all of those things that, I basically have to be nurse and doctor. I have to have all of those things at my disposal to treat her, because clearly the ER wasn't going to treat her. Clearly her past hospice agency wasn't going to treat her. Clearly the doctor's office wasn't going to treat her. Um, so I did everything I could to kind of build an arsenal in her home, to care for her. And now we're intaking her with a new hospice agency.
Okay, so
Exhausting.
you're trying to manage her end of life, which is such a critical time
Mhm.
for her and for you. This is the time when you want to feel like I can feel good about providing for her. This is the time when you feel like I don't want regrets, that I didn't
Mhm.
do enough for her, that I didn't resolve her pain.
Correct.
We know that you don't have to die in pain
Mhm.
and that there are resources to help you accomplish that. It's just infuriating that those resources basically said, "Oh, we can't help you."
Correct.
So you're getting a new hospice organization. It
Mhm.
sounds like that enrollment period is taking a little bit.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
you're still trying to get it organized so that she's
A
on.
little bit, because I called once I learned, thanks to your wonderful community, that I had a choice in hospice. I feel like a veteran caregiver, and I didn't know I had a choice. So I actually called a few because I really wanted to. I wanted to interview them like I would interview any care agency and talk about palliative versus hospice and what the transition is. And even when we get to that 6 month mark, if for some miracle reason she's still alive, what will happen? I learned a lot in that failure of the first agency. And so I wanted to take the week to take my time to reach out to a few, to make sure it was a good fit for her and for me for the duration of her life.
We're a consumer of healthcare services
Hmm.
and we aren't taught that.
No.
And we are a consumer of hospice services. We don't
Hmm.
have to just take what's offered to us.
Exactly. And I did not know that.
And
So
the other,
important.
and it is important. And I think we have talked about palliative care. And if I remember correctly, your grandmother was actually receiving palliative care as
Yes.
well.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you actually were an advocate of her having palliative care so there would
absolutely.
be a smooth transition to hospice care.
Hmm. I
so,
was.
so you were deliberately making great decisions.
Yes.
And the reason that we want to have that transition from palliative to hospice as soon as possible is because hospice is another provider and
Hmm.
it is a change. And so you want
Yes.
to get used to what is different about a hospice service. So,
Correct.
for instance, gosh, I had a family caregiver that I worked with through the community that I used to
Hmm.
own. She waited. This is this always gets me. Her doctor was very involved in her mother's care. And
Hmm.
her doctor waited until 2 weeks before her mother died to recommend hospice services. Her mother had significant pain issues. And so the doctor was managing the pain
Hmm.
and then referred her to hospice services. And then hospice said, we can't cover those meds that you're using for pain. So
Yes.
we need to change the meds. Could you imagine that? They had to change the meds. That's why you don't want to wait till the last minute
No.
because you don't want those kinds of changes that
No.
manage pain at the end of someone's life.
And change is disruptive in a perfectly healthy state. And an end of life state, when they're stressed, the caregiver stressed, the family stressed, change is almost insurmountable sometimes. And so they don't. I think one of the things I learned through the system is that, as much as I said change is too disruptive to my grandmother, that was never taken into consideration, in her care, um, or the caregiver's care. And one of the things the doctor said to me, a geriatric doctor said to me, "I'm concerned about the long term effects of this pain medication." And I said, "She's 94. What do you think the long term effects are going to do?" I had to laugh. How ridiculous is that? She's going to die from cancer.
Yeah, I mean, your mouth just opens.
It
That's the
does.
thing. It's infuriating because every time you go for a solution, another problem appears. And then
Absolutely.
instead of having a solution, you have two problems. And
Yes,
then it just keeps doubling.
it
And it's
does.
and you work a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
You have two daughters.
Mm-hmm.
You have a spouse.
I do.
You have
Who's
a
a saint.
house. Yeah, right. Yes. And you want all those things to stay
Mhm.
in a good place.
Right.
And you want your grandmother to receive what it is that will keep her
Yes,
comfortable.
100%. Yes.
So you also hired help.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that that is just a nightmare now because there's
Yes.
not enough help.
Yes.
If you had unlimited resources, it still would be hard to find the help.
I shelled out in the past week when I was trying to sort of bridge the gap between care, hired an agency about $4,000 outright. No insurance or Medicare, nothing covers that. And they promised me 24/7 care. And I still had a night where someone just didn't show up and they didn't cover it with anybody. So yeah, it's unreliable. And it's gotten worse during the pandemic.
Yeah. So $4,000 bought you how much care? Meaning how long will that
4 days.
care? So 4,000, 4 days of 24/7
Yes.
care.
It's not sustainable for any family. It's not.
I still am always just like, I don't even know how to respond to that because how does anybody manage this?
I don't know.
So right now, what help do you have in place?
So right now I have a new person coming in who's moving in with my grandmother to help with day to day. I'm there all the time, but like you had mentioned, I have other responsibilities. It's like it's just a hamster wheel, as you know, and that's why we need to start focusing on the caregiver, because when I'm away from work, I'm not making money. I'm not putting in into my own long term planning because I'm caring for who's now. So if I have to take my time and money away to care for her, I won't have it, and it's gonna just a generational cycle that will never ever end. So it's troubling to me. It's why we really need some serious change.
So we've put together a campaign to act, which really is about how do we use existing funds in a better way? Because we
Yes.
know that there's money out there, but oftentimes money goes to the wrong things.
Yes.
We continually research the same thing over and over around the caregiving experience. And
Mhm.
instead of researching caregiving, let's research programs and services that help. Let's give help to the family caregivers and see what happens when they have help. I mean, to me,
Absolutely.
that's just
Mhm.
an amazing way to use
Yeah.
research money. We research disease processes. Let's include in that research budget money to support families today.
Yes.
I was talking to a family caregiver earlier this week, and she said, I appreciate that they want to research my husband's disease process, but it's not going to change our life right now.
Right.
And so, thinking about, sure, we want to help families in the future, but we also need to really help families right now. So, there's a way that we can use funds right
Mhm.
now in a better, more effective way that can truly change the lives of family caregivers. And that's what our campaign to act is all about. So, Kara is one of our committee members. I had reached out and said, how do you feel about getting involved? It was important for you to get involved. Why is it important to you?
It is important to me, sort of like what I said before. This is going to be a generational cycle. And I have two daughters. I do not want them in the same position that I am in now. Um, I don't resent or regret having to take care of my mother or my grandmother, but I don't want them in that situation. I want them to sort of live their life on their terms, experience everything they should in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And, I just cannot let her and her friends lose a part of themselves to caregiving when there is money to help. I mean, how fast did they come up with stimulus checks to help people with the COVID? Well, caregiving and aging is a pandemic. Where's our stimulus check? Where's our how can you help me set up my home appropriately? Where's my tax credit? Where are the things that I'm doing to fill that gap of the how many billions of dollars family caregivers provide in this country, unpaid?
In the fall of 2014, it just really struck me that family caregiver stress is the overlooked epidemic in our
Yes.
communities, and it's getting worse. We still have not actually moved the dial to minimize
No.
stress.
No,
We've
the
actually,
stress is unbearable. I mean, there have been times I went to my husband and said, "This is literally killing me. I feel like I'm dying." And I prepared my life. What if I go before my loved one, which is a very real concern for a lot of family caregivers because of stress.
okay. Yes, the stress is just unbearable. It is unbearable. And the problem about the stress too is there's no break from it. Every day you wake up into stress. Every night you go to sleep thinking, oh gosh, can I get up tomorrow and do this again? It really is this chronic stress over a period of years.
Yes.
And you're the example of what that looks like. It's decades.
Decades. I like to say that a family caregiver, our life kind of is on a sliding scale, chaos being the least amount of it to catastrophe. And if you only have chaos during the day, that's a good day. And no human should have to live like that. But we just kind of hover between chaos and catastrophe. And it's never just okay once you're in this role.
Okay, so we'd love for you to join us. You can sign our petition, which is on change.org. I'll include a link to on the bottom of this video in our description section. I'm also going to include a link to an article that came out yesterday in the New Republic. Kara shared some experiences in that article as well. And I'll also share a link to the video that she recorded last week. So you can see what it looks like in that moment of utter devastation that things are not going to work, where you just think, I've lost faith. I don't know how this is going to work out. Okay. Kara, thank you so much.
Thank
Always
you.
great to connect and
You
share with
too,
you.
Denise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks everybody for
Bye.
watching. Bye
Bye.
bye.